Hello YouTube, Sean Bradley here, and today I will be reviewing Dunkirk, the new film written and directed by Christopher Nolan. The film is set during the evacuation of the beaches of Dunkirk in France in 1940 during World War II and is told from three perspectives. The first involves a young British soldier named Tommy, played by Fionn Whitehead, who makes it to the beach where he and a bunch of other soldiers, such as Alex, played by Harry Styles, and Gibson, played by Aneurin Barnard, try to survive on the beach as they constantly get bombed by the Germans, while Commander Bolton, played by Kenneth Branagh, is trying to sort out the situation with his crew. The second perspective is from the sea and revolves around Mr. Dawson, played by Rylance, his son Peter, played by Glynn-Carney, and a teenage hand named George, played by Keoghan, who sail away to Dunkirk in Mr. Dawson's boat to aid in the evacuation. Whilst en route, they rescue a shell-shocked soldier, played by Cillian, which causes conflict with the other three men. And the third perspective is from the air, as it revolves around three Spitfire pilots, one of which is played by Tom Hardy, who are underway across the English Channel to help the troops. So, I went into this film hearing nothing but rave reviews, with a few disappointing critiques. But I went in open-minded, as Christopher Nolan is one of my favourite directors, and it is something new. It is his first biographical film, first war film, and it's his first period film in 11 years since 2006's The Prestige. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I went to see the film in IMAX, and my eyes were metaphorically glued to the screen. An estimated 75% of this film was shot with IMAX cameras, and it looks gorgeous. It looks clear and big in scale. The cinematography is done by Hoyte van Hoytema, who had photographed Nolan's previous film Interstellar. The action sequences are great to look at. The scenes where the soldiers are being attacked by the Germans on the beaches of Dunkirk are suspenseful, and there are points in the film where they begin to turn on each other, as you do in a survival film. The aerial scenes were shot quite well, leaving a feeling in my stomach when something extreme happens with the Spitfire planes. The editing is very non-linear, as previously seen in many of Nolan's other works, such as following Memento, Inception, and Interstellar. The three major storylines are covered for different periods of time. The beach scenes cover a week during the evacuation. The scenes with Mr. Dawson on the boat cover a day, while the Spitfire scenes in the air cover just only 1 hour. So just like some of his previous films, Nolan plays about with time. It also transitions nicely from IMAX footage to the 35mm scenes, giving the audience time to adjust themselves to the ratio and to get used to it. As opposed to Transformers The Last Night, which kept cutting back and forth between different aspect ratios, even in the same scene, in mid-conversation, to the point where it becomes distracting. This film is Nolan's shortest film since Following, clocking in at 1 hour and 46 minutes. It is very minimal on dialogue, as Nolan had intended to create suspense solely through the details. However, the need for details had resulted in a lack of character development, and the lack of character development could be the weakest point of the film. The acting in this film is great. I liked the performances of Rylance and Cillian, who had put a lot of work into their acting, with Murphy showing the effects of PTSD in a subtle performance, as he looks very depressed and has a tendency to shiver. No, really, he's credited in this movie as the Shivering Soldier. They didn't even bother giving him a name. While Rylance is well reserved and delivers his lines with a sense of vulnerability and decency, and there are also times where he can be confrontational. Fionn Whitehead is great in this film, and Harry Styles does okay in his acting debut, as he has appeared as himself in many documentary films about his band One Direction, such as Morgan Spurlock's One Direction, This Is Us, and in TV shows such as iCarly or Saturday Night Live. Styles has some range in his performance, acting casual in some scenes, sad in others, and confrontational in one pivotal scene where he is interrogating a soldier whom he suspects of being a German spy. His casting has been compared to Nolan's casting of Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. And guess how that turned out?
Actor Heath Ledger was found dead Tuesday afternoon.
No, after that.
And the Oscar goes to Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight.
When it was announced that Ledger would be playing the Joker, the public poured scorn over the news, but his performance, as well as his death, helped turn that around. Both Whitehead and Styles make their feature film debuts, with Whitehead having previously had a role in the British TV miniseries Him. Kenneth Branagh is good in whatever screen time he has, playing the Piermaster who is in charge of all of the boats that are travelling from Dunkirk. Jack Lowden has a role as a pilot that is saved by Mr. Dawson after his plane crashes into the ocean, and he does okay. Tom Glynn-Carney as Peter, Mr. Dawson's son, is fine, as well as Barry Keoghan, who plays George. Michael Caine has an uncredited cameo early on in the film as the voice of radio communication to the RAF, marking his 7th collaboration with Christopher Nolan, dating all the way back to when he was cast as Alfred Pennyworth in 2005's Batman Begins. Tom Hardy is a great actor who has had many great roles in The Dark Knight Rises, Inception, Bronson, Legend, and The Revenant. In those films, he is given a lot to do with his characters, thus giving them growth in their development. But in this film, he does not get a lot to do, as his screen time is mostly spent in the cockpit of a Spitfire plane. His performance is good, but he isn't given enough to do. Also, his masks that he wears whilst talking to the other pilots kept reminding me of Bane. We will destroy Gotham, and then, when it is done, and Gotham is ashes, then you'll have my permission to die. The film takes a similar approach to films like Titanic and Pearl Harbor, which set their narratives around a major disaster, but from the perspectives of fictional characters. The characters in Dunkirk are all fictional, although some are based loosely on or composites of real people. Despite the acting of the central players being great, none of the characters get a character arc. Except for Barry Keoghan, who plays George, who is perhaps the only person in the film to get a character arc. We are never really given anything to cling on to make us root for the characters. This is the 6th feature film in history, according to Wikipedia, to cover this event, starting in 1942 with the Best Picture winning Mrs. Miniver, the 1958 film Dunkirk starring John Mills and Richard Attenborough, the 1964 French film Weekend at Dunkirk, It was briefly depicted in 2007's Atonement and played a major part in this year's Their Finest. The sound design is great. The floor of the IMAX cinema was vibrating by the sounds of gunfire and explosions. The score by Hans Zimmer is kind of similar to many of his other scores for Christopher Nolan films, but this does something a little different with the ticking sound of a watch. The film is also subtle in capturing the savagery of war. It is rated 12A in England and PG-13 in America, meaning that parents can take their children to see it. So, it's not a complete gore fest. There are no arms being ripped off, or any limbs flying around, or people lying dead in a pool of their own blood. There's shots of people drowning, and a major character gets a head injury, but not much. Dunkirk now has a 92% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and according to a review, it could be a frontrunner for next year's Academy Awards. So, to sum up the film, Dunkirk is probably one of Christopher Nolan's best films. It is something fresh and new to depart from some of his other exposition-laden films. However, it can be a bit of a weakness, but the lack of exposition is probably Nolan's intention to enhance the visuals and to make us focus on them. The acting is great from many of the cast members, including Mark Rylance, Cillian Murphy, and Harry Styles. The cinematography is brilliant, gorgeous, and so clear that it automatically justifies me picking this film up on 4K Blu-ray when it comes out. The sound design is thrilling with a nice score from Hans Zimmer. I give this film a 9 out of 10. This is Sean Bradley signing out. I'll see you later. Bye!